Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we are looking at what I would say is essentially a free premium ship that has been introduced in the 6.5 update. And that's a brand new Tier 5 Soviet light cruiser, the Mikoyan. The ship technically, well, it didn't exist, but it existed on paper. The Soviets at the time were just post-revolution, had a bit of an issue with actually building ships, which generally happens when you shoot everybody who knows what they're doing, and they were asking the Italians for help. And the Italians said, well, the Ansaldo company more specifically said, sure thing, we've got the plans for the Montecuccoli laying around, and if you want, we'll build you one. The initial concept was asking for a very small cruiser of about 7,000 tons, and the Italians said they could fit 6 of the Soviet 180mm cannons onto these things. This eventually then became or evolved into the Projekt 26, which became the Kirov class. But the ship itself was obviously never built, because this is only the first design draft. But that's what we have here now. And my first thought, well, hang on a minute, Mikoyan, I've heard that before. No, she's probably not named after the aircraft designer on account of this being a ship which tends to stay in the water and not fly through the air unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. And as such, she's probably named after the Soviet politician and communist who was also named Mikoyan. So, let's have a quick look on how the Mikoyan compares to the Kirov, for obvious reasons. And the first thing we notice is that the Mikoyan has a very different skill set. The Kirov has the frankly useless defensive AA skill at this tier, and the Mikoyan gets the significantly more useful rapid reload, and she gets a scout plane. So this is a scout plane 2, which gives us 16% additional range for half a minute. And she gets 3 charges of it, which is fairly generous. So let's see what warrants this generosity on the ship skill selection. Well, the Mikoyan's got fewer hit points, but is noticeably more maneuverable than the Kirov. But the guns is where it gets interesting, because she only gets 6 of them. But they do reload faster with 10.5 seconds, and that's obviously where the rapid reload comes in here. And they have a longer range than the Kirovs. And then if you slap everything on it that you can, you start getting a very significant range for a Tier 5 light cruiser. And other than that, they are the same guns. The turret traverse is terrible, as is expected, and the torpedoes are also the exact same. The anti-air firepower is absent, but then let's be fair, the Kirov doesn't really have an awful lot of AA either. And the concealment is better. So that leads us to a ship with an extremely long range and the capability of dishing out a fair amount of firepower, because at Tier 5 these 180s are against light cruisers very, very deadly. So let's see what we can do with this thing. Well, it turns out one of the elite bonuses is the Advanced Gun Director, which allows us to increase the firing range by 4%. So yes, that's what we're doing. We then have the Soviet camouflage, which, to be honest, as alternate camos go, looks very pretty in my opinion, and which gives us another 4% main battery firing range. You see where this is going. The historical camo gives you firing range as well, but where the Soviet camo makes sense by giving us better dispersion and better traverse speed, the historical camo then turns completely useless by giving us torpedo speed, which nobody needs, and large caliber AA range, which nobody needs either. So honestly, I wouldn't spend 1,000 gold on the historical camo on this one. I would try to get the Soviet camo if you can get your hands on it. It is significantly better than the other one. Right. Equipment-wise, we can't fit the precision module, unfortunately, so I am going to sail with the main battery mod 2 here for faster reload, because, yeah, these 180s take a while to reload. But other than that, it's an obvious choice in slot 2, and we can't fit the concealment module, so we're just going to go with steering gear, although you could maybe go with speed as well, because these are relatively quick ships. But let's have a look at what that gets us all in stats. So we've got an under 5-second turn time. The guns are just skirting 10 seconds on the reload and have a 12.2 kilometer base range. And before we even use the spotter plane, the torpedoes are meaningless, and the concealment stands at 8.3 kilometers, which isn't terrible. Now, as is traditional about this point, I have played the ship with a standard sort of setup and with a fully decked out setup. But before we look at that, let's have a very quick look at the battle honors. It's a premium ship, so the battle honors are basically just free stuff. Play 5 battles. Yep, that's extremely hard to finish. And destroy 2 ships in a battle for a free item of copper for the shipyard. So yes, free stuff as expected. But yeah, I have picked Makarov for obvious reasons, who, as far as I remember, is actually relatively difficult to obtain. There was a crate a while back, and he was really hard to get. Well, that's probably because he's got the APCS Plus skill. But if we're using, there's nothing really we can use to buff the scout plane, but we can and should be using the fire supremacy as well as the master reloader, which means that the commander you're going to be putting on this ship is probably not too well suited for the rest of the Soviet line, because I don't think any of those gets the rapid reload skill. Although the alternatives are compartment maintenance and honor seeker, which are not massively useful skills. I would probably take compartment maintenance on anything else. But he does get the APCS Plus skill for a much buffed armor-piercing shell. And then the horizontal protection, honestly, on this ship doesn't make an awful lot of sense, because it does not have any armor. As it's a light cruiser, it's basically made of tinfoil. But you could. This is the legendary skill, so I've just picked it. But yeah, that would be for the second battle. First game is on regular. So we have a Soviet light cruiser with the Kirov's guns, faster reload, but only 6 of them, and with a good range on her. So that could be interesting, especially that this thing is pretty maneuverable, and I like that. So let's go for it. The first round is domination on New Dawn in a 5v5 against New York, Königsberg, another Mikoyan, another Königsberg, and a Hatsuharu. Now this is tier 5, so you'll find, well, it's mid-tier per very definition. You'll find a lot of people who have very little experience. But, well, that's just sort of the thing, right? You get a tier 5 premium, what are you going to do? Can't play it in tier 8. So we'll see how we can make ourselves useful here. And given that we are a relatively maneuverable light cruiser, I am going to head over into A-Cup. Ideally, you want to play the ship at long range, except for situations where the enemy team is literally not paying any attention whatsoever. Now, these Soviet 180mm are a little bit different from the light cruiser guns that you're normally used to, because they hit really hard. They actually behave more like heavy cruiser guns. So if you're firing if you're firing at enemy destroyers, you'll often find that your armor piercing is over-penetrating, whereas it can be very deadly against everything else, including battleships. There is a Königsberg, and look at the range on this thing. It's pretty amazing. What do we have over there? There's one, it's in New York, and I think that is a player. But there's also a bot Mutski. So let's see if we can deal with the Mutski first, just so he gets out of the way, and it doesn't start torpedoing me, which bots can do sometimes. So here you can start seeing that at this range, what you really should be doing is using high explosive. So I've got the rapid reload up, but the armor piercing is just over penetrating. So there's not an awful lot that I'm actually doing to this little Japanese destroyer here, just simply by the fact that I'm mostly over penetrating. I can drop my torpedoes at this range, But I really need to get a little bit further away from the ship in order to make the armor piercing work. And fortunately, well, that's still not far away enough. Fortunately, he is obliging, however, and the bot is chasing the other bot, the bot Fuso over there. So I'm going to let the Fuso deal with that, because I have got light cruisers to shoot at. And I've also got a Congo to shoot at over there. So let's switch over to the HE for the Congo, although, I mean, he is full health and he is a bot. So let's dodge the incoming fire from the Königsberg. That's what you can do with a very maneuverable ship at long ranges. You can just dodge. But there's also the New York, and it looks like Königsberg is coming in. So let's make ourselves useful, just unload the HE, and then we'll switch over to the armor piercing against Königsberg. And yeah, I don't necessarily want to be any closer, because I have the range to really make use of these guns and make them count where I can. And I always have the option to extend the range with the scout plane if need be. Right now it doesn't need. So while Königsberg is finding out that bots sometimes load the armor piercing, and New York seems to be extremely committed in trying to take on this Fuso at close point blank range. So we'll make ourselves useful. I'm just using the armor piercing here, and I'm trying to get the Königsberg killed before we start focusing on the New York. But obviously once the New York has figured out that there's another ship besides that Fuso that he's completely zoned in, he is going to come after me. So let's drop some torpedoes, start some work on the New York, and then we're getting ourselves out of here. Obviously, once you start turning the ship, the gun turrets are pretty hopeless. So now that Fuso is still alive. So I've dropped some torpedoes into the New York, but he still hasn't realized that I'm even here. And that means I can send off the other torpedo spread and then make myself scarce, while we're getting some distance, and that bot Fuso is still alive, and we're getting another couple of torpedo hits. There is the Königsberg again. So now that I am giving stern to the New York, and the New York has already shown not necessarily to be paying great attention to what's going on around him, I am going to try and again get the Königsberg killed, but Königsberg hasn't moved. I have shot his engine off, but let's get ourselves a slightly better angle view to see where he's going and finish off the Königsberg, and then we will deal with the New York. So that's a dead Königsberg, and that leaves that New York. Now this is a very light cruiser, but the New York has only 2 turrets forward, and the dispersion on these guns is not great. So I'm not too afraid of him, especially again that he has shown well, a penchant for not paying an awful lot of attention to what's going on around him. So he's not going broadside in order to get all his guns to bear. He's instead trying to chase me. I'm not sure why, but yeah, like I said, these guns are hilariously inaccurate to begin with, and if you're misaiming them, I'm trying to shoot his forward turrets off. But honestly, at this point, I think I can just finish him with torpedoes, because there's no way that he's going to get out of this. He's in New York. These things are pedestrian in speed. So there you go. Have some torpedoes, and then that thing is finished. He can't rotate his turrets to get on target, and that's that. Obviously, if you're running into a player who knows what they're doing, you know, that's a different proposition completely. But how's it looking? Oh, there's only one ship left. So we'll make our way over into Sea Cup, but I'm a cut ahead to when something's happening again, which might take a little bit of time. Okay, there's the Hatsuharu, and the Rio is playing around the island. I mean, the Hatsuharu has to know that the Rio's got the high explosive loaded at this point, right? You do not want to come out fully broadside next to a Rio. Yeah, that's what that does. Well played, Rio. That's a very satisfying thing to do. So yeah, you can rack up a fair amount of damage if the enemy team isn't paying any attention. But well, what if it is? What if you have to be a little bit more careful? And we find ourselves bottom tier. It's another 4v4, and this time it's La Galissonière double Mikoyan and a Minikaze. We also have 2 Mikoyans on our side. Now, this is with the APCS Plus skill, but still, this is a very light cruiser. You don't want to get in a point-blank broadside brawl with, say, a Königsberg. because these things just outgun you. And you do have to occasionally be a little careful. But the gun layout lends itself to positioning, to bow and positioning quite well. It's a maneuverable ship, and it's a fast ship. I mean, this thing does over 35 knots, over 36 actually. Do we have an IFK Omaha? Might be. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the left flank and just see what's coming up this way, and if there's anything that I need to deal with. I do have the rapid reloads. I do have the scout plane ready for extended range, and the guns are reasonably precise to make that work. So let's see if anything comes up this way. Otherwise, I'll just push down this flank and threaten the enemy cap. But just cruisers. But like I said, and I've shown you in the previous game, you don't really have to be afraid of battleships. You can, if you're comfortable with playing German light cruisers, you'll be feeling right at home with this thing, because the guns are feeling very similar to the effects that you get out of the German 150s. Okay, enemy Mikoyan spotted, and we'll immediately start unloading. Let's get the rapid reload up. We're actually over penetrating that thing. He has backup from the Galissonière, so I am probably going to go defensive here and see that we can. We do have to actually hit the center of the ship, because if we're hitting too far forward, yes, if we're hitting the center, this happens. If we're hitting too far forward, we're just over penetrating. So I'm just going to go defensive here, because he's got backup and I don't. And I mean, I'm not sure what he's trying to do here. Is he trying to torpedo rush me? I'm not sure. But at least he's firing armor piercing, which I think is the standard loadout in the ship, which is good. So we're just mitigating the damage by reversing, which means the Galissonière is missing most of his shots. And the enemy Mikoyan is trying to torpedo rush, maybe? You do realize that I have torpedoes as well, right? That is not something that will come as a surprise to you. I mean, here, have torpedoes. And I'm just trying to dodge the torpedo drop from the Mikoyan, because that's the only reason I can think of why he would be actually doing this in the first place, while giving me perfect broadside. Yes, there he goes. So he went for a torpedo rush. He has forgotten that I can do that as well. And now he's dead, and I have taken barely any damage. So if you find yourself in a scenario where your relatively light armament is becoming an issue, then just go defensive, and if you don't have the rapid reload ready, and make yourself useful that way, and just mitigate damage. So definitely something you can do. The Galissonière is heavily maneuvering, frequently steering and changing direction, but is focused very much on that battleship over there. So what is that? Anyway, he's gonna have torpedoes away at the battleship. I don't think he's gonna drop torpedoes at me, so I don't have to worry about that too much. I can just unload at that thing. It's a New York, yes. I can just unload at the Galissonière while he is getting into a way too close fight with that battleship over there, and his only luck is that the battleship can't aim, and obviously this being a New York also does have one of the world's worst dispersion. Minikaze, full health. Okay, I might have to deal with that actually. Oh, these torpedoes dropped at me. They might have been. Could have been dropped at the New Yorks, difficult to tell. But yeah, there you see the problem again, Minikaze. And I am going to have to give broadside to the Galissonière over there, while I am hunting down the Minikaze. Not that he's going to start threatening our capture circle. But unfortunately, the high explosive on the ship is okay, but it's not grand. So you're sort of a little bit in the pickle sometimes, that you gotta get really close to make the HE work properly against destroyers, while the AP doesn't really work at close ranges properly. And anything in between, you have that sort of dead zone where the HE is not really penetrating and the AP is over penetrating. Okay, I'm sure the Minikaze is reloaded by now, but again, he is focused in on the New York, so he is now dead, which means I can switch back to the armor piercing. That's a carrier drop, I believe, from the bot carrier, and then we'll work on the Galissonière again. I mean, Galissonière has torpedoes and has been shooting. Nope. He wants to finish off that battleship over there. Okay, which makes sense. It's a low health battleship, and it's definitely the bigger threat. The problem is that I have very precise long-range 180mm guns, so that Galissonière is not gonna be having a great time. And 8 kilometers is definitely not enough. But he goes down to the New York. New York survives, all good. And it's just the bot carrier left. So where do you actually get the Mikoyan? You can get it in the fleet shop for 300 fleet tokens. You get fleet tokens for donating oil to your fleet, and you get oil from completing daily missions or weekly missions. So you probably have some fleet tokens laying around, and you just go to the fleet shop, and you find the ship there, and it is very affordable. So it's a good choice. I would say it's an interesting alternative to the Kirov, which is a good ship at per tier, and you can see that thing can do 13 kilometers easily and still get its guns on target. So this is a fun ship, and I would definitely recommend it for mid-tier gameplay, especially if you know what you're doing. But even if you're new, just if you're a new player, and look at the absolute carnage this thing is doing. If you're a new player, probably the one thing for you to take away is to not get close and brawl. This is a ranged ship primarily, so it's very maneuverable. So being bow in at range, just raining death and destruction on the enemy team, is a good choice. Definitely play with the armor piercing, because it's a very good armor piercing, and have some fun with it, because that is a fun tier 5 light cruiser, and very enjoyable ship all in all. So there we are, 3 tier 5 light cruiser, go, and assuming I'm going to see a lot more of them in the days to come. Just remember, they do have torpedoes. So that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.